Can you tell me your name, please, and spell it?
Jean Lazinger, Janlazinger.
And what was your name at birth?
My name at birth was Gusia Weinstock. I was born in Monastyryska, Poland. It's a very small town, maybe 3,000 people. My grandparents lived there, my parents, my aunts and uncles. My father's name was Herzl Weinstock. He was in the First World War. He was a soldier, and after the war he started buying metal that was left over after the war, and that's how he started making his money. By the time he married my mother, he already had 10 stores. My mother's name was Sala Kallenberg Weinstock. I was always with my mother, since my father worked long hours. So wherever she went, she took me along. I remember going to the dressmaker with her. I remember going for fittings. I remember going to the park. I have a brother named David. He's 6 years older than I am. In 1933, we moved to Lvov. It was a big city. It wasn't any different than any city in the United States. It was an old city that had beautiful buildings and beautiful avenues and beautiful parks. I went to help my father in the store. Then my maid picked me up, and I stayed with her. Her name was Pavlina. She was Ukrainian. I always liked coloring. I liked to draw, and I liked to sew. I started very, very young. I started knitting when I was about 4 years old. My dreams was to be a designer, to be a clothes designer. I've wanted to do that since I was very, very little. I never made it, but that was my dream. I started school pretty early. School was not compulsory in Poland. My principal was very anti-Semitic. She hated the idea that I was in school there, that they put me so early in school. She felt she didn't want to teach me, and every time I would pass by, she would stick her foot out so I would trip on the floor. The summers we spent in the mountains. We always rented a little room near a hotel. We went swimming, we went hiking, and we went to the movies, and I made friends. It was like a colony of little rooms that we rented. And the best memory was really the last year that I remember the best. Because at that time my father already sold his store, and it was the first summer that he stayed with us. And that was 1939. I was 9 years old. And then we started seeing a lot of airplanes. And my father said, well, I think something is brewing. Let's get out of here. They started bombing the city right away. I remember being very frightened, my mother grabbing me from bed and going to the basement in the house that my father built. There were 12 apartments there. And just a week before the war started, my father wanted to sell the house. Had we had the money, maybe we could have run away. But my father put all the money that he had into the apartment house to have income. And when they were bombing the city, we were hiding in the basement, and it got worse and worse. And we ran to my grandmother's house. And one day we heard the music. We heard an army marching in to a small town. I was in the balcony. It was a Russian army. When we went back to the city, they started taking people that had any kind of money. They called them bourgeois, which means a rich person. And they would close streets and take these people to Siberia. The whole streets of people used to disappear. So we knew about it already, so we used to sleep with 3-4 different kind of clothes on us, that they come, that we have the clothes on us. My father was very resourceful. They told him, don't go, don't ask for anything. My father says, I have to get a job. He says, how are you going to get a job? He says, I have some fabrics from my store, and I'm going to give somebody a bribe. And he went over to a man that was in charge of cigarettes and tobacco. They made him the manager of a tobacco store. And he heard that you could buy citizen papers of South American countries. So he had already some money, and he sent it to America to his cousins who ran away from Vienna, and they were living here, to buy them those papers. The destination was Nicaragua. Those papers were kept a secret from me, and one night, and I remember this, I got up in the morning, and I says, Ma, I had a wonderful dream. The dream was that there was a very big storm, and they were shooting. And my mother, my father, my brother, and I were standing together. And there was a big angel behind us. And the angel said, don't worry, you will all survive. And I told my mother that dream. I didn't want to go to school. I says, Ma, I see this big angel standing behind us with the wings and holding us together.
How old were you then?
11. That same day, the papers arrived. My father bought a ticket to go to Vladivostok. From there, to go to Japan, and from Japan to the United States, and from here to Nicaragua. And Sunday we were supposed to leave. Well, Sunday morning we got all dressed and we went to the train. There was no train. The trains were taking away to the army. The war broke out between the Germans and the Russians that same day. They called all the Jews in the marketplace. They put down the laws. If you have any jewelry, any fur, you have to give them. Any money, you have to give them. Of course, a lot of people didn't. They grabbed people on the street. Jews were not allowed to walk on the sidewalk, only on the road. Had to put on a white armband with a blue star on it. If they caught a Jew without it, they'll either shoot him or beat him up. They started grabbing people from the street to work for them. And it was a very big hill there, and they had trucks, and they didn't want to use gasoline, so they grabbed Jewish people on the street to push the trucks up the hill. We all started hiding in all different houses. And my father knew quite a few people that weren't Jewish, Gentiles, and they hid us for one night, then we went somewhere else for another night. I remember walking in the dark and just looking at the moon and the stars, and says, there are people that see the same moon and they're free. That was a very, very sad time. He says that people still live normal. My father started working in the black market again, selling candy, selling coffee, whatever he could. He never put on an armband, and he never lived in the Jewish section. And one day, he's jaywalking, and a German grabs him. He says, oh my God, that's the end of me. First of all, I'm Jewish. And second thing, I'm on the black market. I'm dead. He looks at this German. He recognizes him. The German recognizes my father. He says, Schultz. My father says, Weinstock. He used to have a factory of fabrics where my father bought from him fabrics. He says, I will help you. And this German helped us. Anyway, he used to come to us at night and have coffee with us, and he would tell us, tomorrow there's going to be an action. They're catching people on the street. You are to go in a trolley car in the morning. Go to the end of the trolley car, change, and come back. And spend a whole day on a trolley car. And this is what we did. 2 or 3 times that happened. And one day, came back to the apartment, and we hear these big loudspeakers. America is at war. When America came to war, there was a new law. Anybody that has any kind of papers to different countries is going to be interned. They wanted to exchange the Germans that live in the United States for the people that have papers somewhere else. They rented a big house, which was also a Jewish house. It must have been about 50 apartments there. And all the people that had these papers moved there. Again, with a pushcart, we went, whatever we had, we went there, and everybody just got one room. So it was like 6, 7 families in each apartment. We met people there from Israel, we met people there from Chile, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Mexico, that bought those papers the same way as we did. There was a German soldier in front of the building. We were locked in that building, and we had 1 hour in the morning from 10 to 11 to go out to get groceries. We felt a little bit safe in this building. Some people were teachers, started taking the young kids, teaching them English or Hebrew, just to keep busy because we had nothing to do. We stayed in this building about 6 months. In July, they're taking us to be interned in Germany. We're on a train now, going to we don't know where. We're there for a couple of days. They did not give us any food. And I think this was the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me. It was when they opened the doors and they started yelling, "Heraus, heraus!" And I saw these Germans with big dogs. And I see these people with shaved off heads and striped uniforms carrying bunk beds from one barrack to the other. I remember being completely frozen and shaking. I was very, very frightened because I heard the stories already, what happened in Auschwitz, what happened. I says, well, this is it. And I could feel myself shaking now, because I feel just shaking. But seeing the people there frightened us more than anything, the condition they were in. But these were all war prisoners, Russian and French war prisoners that were working, fixing up the barracks for us to go in. They marched the men to one barrack, the women and children to another barrack. It was a distance of a half mile maybe between the men and the women. I saw the barbed wire. They said not to touch it. They were full of electric. And the Germans in the little houses looking at us. You can't do anything. We were the first ones, civilian people in this camp. As the days progressed, they brought people from Warsaw, from Krakow, from different cities with the same papers. They were all merchants that were able, they had enough money to buy those papers, were very expensive. By the end of the week, we were 5,000 people from all different parts of Poland with all different kinds of papers. We were locked in the barrack. Everybody told their stories. There were teachers. There was one woman that wrote poetry. She used to read poetry to us at night. There was one woman that was a travel agent. She used to tell us about Paris and about different countries. There was nothing to do but talk. They only called us by name every couple of weeks. This Zeidel came with these big dogs, with a little table, and call names, cross them out in random. These people got to be packed. We're going to a different camp. This went on for the 2 years I was there. Camp got smaller. From 5,000 became 4,000 and 3,000. I think we were left maybe 200 people by that time. That was in the spring of 45. We did not know what was going on in the world. Everybody was starved. Everybody was malnourished. Everybody was sick to the point where they didn't care if they shoot us, they don't shoot us. We were right next to a torture chamber. It was horrible. We used to sit with the blankets, go to bed with the blankets on our heads not to hear the screams. The barrack was cold. It was damp. In the morning we got up, there was mushrooms growing on the bed. That's how bad it was. The blankets they gave us were made out of human hair. But you get used to this. I used to go with my girlfriend, we used to pull out the hair, say, see this, who knows, this lady with red hair, what her life was like, and we would pull the hair out of the blankets. As I told you, I was always sewing. And even in camp, I sewed. I ripped stockings, I made this, and at one time, I made 2 dolls, 2 Chinese dolls. I stuffed the dolls, I made them little clothes from rags, and I was sitting on a stoop, and a German came over to him. It was Christmas time. And he says to me, can I have these 2 dolls? And I said, you could have them. The next day he came, he brought me 2 loaves of bread. And that was life. And there was a man, his name was Mr. Silverman. He said to me, you give me these 2 loaves of bread, I'll sign over my house. I have a big apartment house on Broadway 2 in Manhattan. I'll sign over this house to you for the 2 loaves of bread. I did not give up the 2 loaves of bread. We cut them up and we shared them. Spring came and we were pretty weak already. We were there already for 2 years. And he says, now we're going to leave again. That was April 6th, 1945. They marched us out of the gate. That was the first time we went out of the gate. And they gave us, for the trip, raw beets and raw turnip. We marched out of the camp, dead bodies all around us. We were so used to seeing it. We felt sorry for these people, but we said, thank God they are already dead. They don't have to suffer anymore. We were more afraid of the torture than death itself. My mother and I were very thin. My mother weighed 75 pounds. I mean, a walking skeleton. But anyway, we started walking, and all of a sudden, she had a stroke on one side. The bag where she was carrying the beets and the turnip just fell down, and her arm got paralyzed. Half of her face got paralyzed, and one leg got paralyzed. So the rest of the time we had to drag her, because she could just walk with one hand and one foot and pull the other one. We got on a train. It was a passenger train. Almost everybody's swollen. Everybody has dysentery. We're on the train for 7 days. We pass cities that are completely bombed. And my father said, we're going to get liberated on this train. Anyway, we are on this train already the 7th day. And everybody says, I don't care what's going to happen to us now. We couldn't even move anymore. We were sick. Train opens up in a very small town near Magdeburg. And the Germans say, we can't go any further. But he doesn't say why. We don't know what to do with you. We're sending a telegram to Hitler to know what to do with you. Next day they come. He says, we have orders. You're all going to be shot tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Nobody blinked an eye. Nobody cared. Because we were beyond already. We couldn't even think anymore. We were so sick. Next morning, we're staying already in fives to be ready to be shot. And my father sees the Germans coming out with boxes of paper, walking down the ravine, throwing them into the river. My father says, look, they're throwing the evidence. They don't want the evidence what they did to us, because they were very careful about papers, the Germans. We're standing in five, waiting for the order to be shot. Down the hill comes an American soldier. There was the first army American liberated us. The first thing my father did, ran to the river. He took a big stick. He had all different kind of papers, and he was very, very meticulous. He sewed all the papers together with thread and needle. And this was right on top of the water. He took a big stick and he pulled it out. And that's how I ended up with all the papers. They were all waterlogged, but I have them. These were my birth certificates, my father's marriage certificate, the papers that he owned a house. Americans came, big tanks. We were numb. We were completely numb. We weren't happy. We weren't crying. We weren't singing. But a lot of people wanted to go to these German soldiers and hit them. And I remember a girlfriend of mine who is in Switzerland now. She says, don't. We can't be animals like they are. And she was a young girl. And you know what? People thought about it and they didn't hit them. But it was beyond that. We didn't feel happy. We didn't feel anything. We were just numb. The trucks came and picked us up and took us to a small town that was called Hillersleben, where they were building airplanes. And the workers had little, like 4 family houses. They took the Germans out of there and they put us in their apartments. They gave us a room, and that was heaven. But my brother was sick. He was coughing. He had fever. My mother was paralyzed. I had to dress her. I had to wash her. But we were free. The Americans took us to Belgium. And I'm in heaven because we are free. And nobody knows what it feels to be free when somebody was locked up for 2 years. They was treated worse than an animal. I mean, they took care of their dogs. They did not take care of these people. There again, my father did not want to take any help. There was his pride. I went to school. They gave me money to go to school. I went to a designing school where you went at your own pace.
Who gave you money?
UNRWA. My mother went to work in a place where they ripped army coats. They used to dye them and make coats again. And my father used to go to the railway station and buy coffee and sell coffee to the soldiers. Not coffee to drink, but pound coffee. And then we started looking who is left in the family. And that's how we found out that my mother's sister was alive. Meeting my aunt was very traumatic because that's all that was left of the whole family. We remained in Brussels for 3 years. We wanted to come to America because my father had a brother here. My mother had lots of cousins that came from Vienna, and they're the ones that sent us the papers. We moved to Brooklyn, and I went immediately looking for a job. At night, I went to school. I went to learn English. I also went to FIT to pursue my designing. And then I met my husband. He was born in the Bronx. He lived in Lakewood, New Jersey. He was also a veteran of the Second World War. His army liberated us, but he was wounded in Aachen. we met. We went for a nice walk. We talked, and 3 days later, he proposed to me. We had a very nice wedding. We went to Bermuda on our honeymoon, and then we moved to Lakewood. 11 months later, I had my first daughter, Marlene. I was petrified to have a child. And I was sick my whole pregnancy because I was afraid that somebody's going to come and take my child away from me. But then when she was born and I had her in my arms, it was wonderful. My next child was Zeph. We had both children, one bedroom, and they just started building little houses in Lakewood. And they needed $1,500 for a deposit, which we didn't have. We borrowed that money to put a deposit in that house. And we just started fixing up the apartment, the house, and I became pregnant with my third one, Lisette. And then I had the fourth one, Maxwell. They're all wonderful. We put everything into the children. We saved every penny to make sure that they had an education, something that both of us couldn't have. All four very hard workers. They are very good, giving people. They were taught to share. Whatever they have, you have to share. You have to help one another. I have beautiful grandchildren. When I was about 11 years old, and I was hidden in that little apartment, that little room with my mother, I said at night, I'm going to make a prayer. And the prayer is going to be, I'm not going to ask for anything. Just say, thank God I'm still here. And thank God my parents are still alive. And every night, I thank God, and no matter how bad things were, I knew God was there, and I always knew that angel was there. And I see that angel many times in my dreams. It's a very big angel, and I'm sorry I didn't bring the picture, because I made the picture when I was a child, what it looked to me in my dream, and I still have it. I had a good life. I'm a happy person. I'm happy with whatever I have. I'm satisfied with whatever I have. People don't realize it's the most wonderful thing to have a home, because when you don't have it and you walk on the street and you look at other homes where there's a family and you don't have it, you learn to appreciate it when you have it. I'm not prejudiced against any people at all. I like everybody.
What message would you like to leave for your children, for your grandchildren, and for all the future generations to follow?
To be tolerant, to love each other, to help anybody that needs help.